I'm sitting in the office of a guy that's leading a church of like 5,000 people. And I'm thinking, what do I have to offer this guy? And yet he so valued just me asking questions and following up and caring and listening. I don't have to have all the answers, but if I can come up with some good questions and just be present with this person, there's something really valuable here. My name is Buck Rogers. I'm an InterVarsity alumnus, and whether it's with a large church, a ministry team, or a ministry leader, I help others get clear about what's most important in their life and ministry. Welcome to InterVarsity World Changers.
Buck, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, John. Really looking forward to our time together.
Yes, me too. Well, Buck, before we dive into your story, will you help us just get to know you a little bit, give an introduction, and maybe just give us an introductory snapshot to some of the things that you're doing?
Yeah, well, I have my own little nonprofit called Empower Clarity these days. Prior to that, I was serving with a mission agency called Church Resource Ministries for close to 20 years. And prior to that, I was on a college campus with InterVarsity back east in Pennsylvania.
That's great. Well, hey, let's just pick up the story right there with that little tidbit. Tell us about your time on campus with InterVarsity, how you got connected, some fond memories, some important moments, things that happened while you were there. Let's reminisce a bit together.
Sure. At age 18, I found myself a freshman on a college campus, Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania. A great campus, but a very secular place. And found myself as a young person. I just been a Christian for about a year and a half, and I just knew from day one that I was going to need to get plugged into some kind of Christian fellowship of some kind.
Yeah.
And my particular college had a robust InterVarsity chapter, and really from the very first day I walked onto campus, I got plugged in and had a fantastic 4-year run.
Wow.
Being deeply involved in InterVarsity.
That's amazing. What did some of your involvement look like while you were on campus?
Yeah, well, Friday nights was a large group gathering, and then during the week I got plugged into my very first small group. So my freshman year was just kind of getting acclimated. I did have a couple of seniors that took me under their wing and kind of a mentoring discipleship kind of relationship. And so really from day one, I had some great friendships that started forming. And then from my freshman year, I was invited to lead my very first small group. And so went to training for, I believe it was like a weekend where I got taught small group leadership, basic skill set, and then was plugged in my sophomore and my junior year as a small group leader. I think a couple of other things that figured prominently. I was invited to go to Urbana back in the 1981 is when I was in Urbana, and I had my entire world rocked by that experience. The speakers,
that does tend to happen at Urbana.
Yeah, no, it just flipped my world completely upside down. Kind of came back from that experience really wondering if God was tugging on my heart and preparing a way towards getting involved in ministry. I didn't know if that was going to be in the U.S. or international. I was very interested in the international part of it. But that really was quite formative, which then led me to go to Kenya for a summer with InterVarsity. I was
Nice.
I was part of the very first team that opened up the country of Kenya
Wow.
for summer projects. So I was there for 2 months and came back from that experience feeling like that's really where God was leading me.
Hmm.
And then I think the other thing that was pretty formative, that following senior year, I got a chance to be a part of the executive team that was leading the chapter on campus, and so that was my first foray into higher levels of leadership and
Yeah.
influence within the chapter.
Okay. Okay. Well, all right. So you mentioned Urbana. You mentioned that you had this sense that the Lord was starting to tug your heart towards missions. You had this Kenya experience and sort of sorting through like, okay, is it somewhere abroad? Is it somewhere locally? And I know at some point in your story you end up in Australia, but that doesn't just happen sort of overnight. Tell us the story of the process that led you there and what it was that God was doing through that time.
Yeah, I graduated, and first job opportunities. I end up meeting a young lady who had a heart for overseas work.
Mm,
We ended up getting married, and one of the very first decisions we made as a couple was where were we going to get some further training before we went overseas together.
okay.
Through a process of discernment, we ended up moving to California and enrolling in graduate school at
Okay.
Biola University. And we both picked up our master's degree. I ended up going on for a doctorate a little bit later in
Okay.
missiology. And
Wow.
during that time, we were trying to evaluate where was God leading us, what part of the world. And eventually we were invited by the mission agency that we joined, Church Resource Ministries. It's actually
Hmm.
gone through a name change. It's now called Novo.
Okay.
But when I was a part of it, we called it Church Resource Ministries, or CRM. We were invited by them to consider going to Australia to join an existing team that was coming alongside the church in Australia to strengthen it.
Hmm.
And that was a really good match for us. And we ended up with a very young family, two kids and one on the way.
Wow.
We flew to Australia and we had a fantastic run there for about 5.5 years.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So 5.5 years in Australia, strengthening the church in Australia. Can you share just a little bit about like during the time you were there? What was the state of the church while you're there? What did those strengthening efforts look like for you and some of the skill sets that you were applying while you were there?
Yeah, well, the church in Australia, it's a very secular country. Being a
Hmm.
Christian is a real minority kind of
Okay.
experience. So anything that we could do to come alongside the church, come alongside pastors, was really the focus of our ministry.
Hmm.
Um, we were grafting into an existing team that had opened up some fantastic opportunities around the country. So in my early 30s, I found myself with some pretty unusual doors of opportunity that opened up. But
Okay.
John, what I found that I was pretty good at was I found that I had a knack for being able to ask good questions.
Hmm.
And so I found that pastors really appreciated somebody investing in them,
Yeah.
somebody that was willing to ask questions, to take some notes, to follow up the next time I met with them about progress that they were making in their life. And so that was really my slow entrance into this world of coaching,
Okay.
which is essentially meeting one on one with somebody and really trying to help them in their development. And so that was really the thing that began to become apparent that was going to be the focus of my contribution from the one on one coaching appointments that
Yeah.
I would have with leaders. Eventually, that opened up doors for me to come in and work with ministry teams a little bit more about vision and setting longer term direction. And so began to slowly develop a skill set around consulting and facilitating
Sure.
strategic conversations for teams about direction. So that
Okay.
kind of came in. I learned that on the fly, if you will, but it was really
Yeah.
the one-on-one coaching that really set the table.
That's interesting. And okay, and you said that you were there for 5.5 years. So did you have any, was that the time span that was set for you for being there? Or was that, did you expect to leave after 5.5 years, or were you anticipating being there for a lot longer doing this work in the church?
Yeah, well, the truth of the matter is I could have stayed probably for the rest of my life.
Okay.
I, I was having a ball. I was having a delightful time. But through a series of events and discernment with my wife over a number of months, we just had to wrestle together as a couple um, what we felt like God was saying to us about our future. And we made a really difficult, almost kind of a step of obedience to leave and to come back to Southern California. And it was just a long process of praying together, trying to hear about the future and whether God wanted us to stay in Australia or whether He was closing that door. And when we left after 5.5 years, I cried like a baby. The very last day in our home, packing up the boxes, and yet God's been really faithful. When we came back to Southern California, it took some time for me to develop relationships and rapport here in the U.S. and to really kind of start all over again.
Yeah.
But he's replaced everything that we had in Australia and still cherish those memories.
Yeah. It's just really interesting to hear you say that because, sort of stereotypical, or at least maybe this is just in my mind, but sort of stereotypical missions work or saying yes to Jesus is like we went overseas. We said yes to overseas missions work. And that feels like the kind of thing that, at least growing up in the church, in my mind, it was, well, once the Lord sends you overseas, if you say yes to that and you go, then you're gone. Like that's your thing forever. And because you have done the work of obedience, of saying yes to that calling. And it's really interesting to me. It sort of flips it on its ear for me that there was a call to obedience to step away from that missions work. And that just feels almost, I don't want to say backwards, but that feels very unexpected that would be a work of obedience in your life, of saying yes to Jesus, to stepping away from a mission field.
Yes. Yep. No, it was a very difficult, challenging season, and coming back to the U.S., nobody really cared what I had done in Australia. Wow. I had to rebuild reputation. I had to rebuild credibility, and it took a number of years. And some perseverance on my part, but there was definitely some dark moments for me personally in that whole journey.
Yeah. Okay. So not only is it sort of this unexpected, it's obedient for you to return from the mission field. You didn't return necessarily to open arms and we've got a space all warmed up and ready for you here. It was a return to some like really hard work internally and relationally to sort of get back on your feet and figure out what the next steps were for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was some financial shortages. We were living at that time fully on support from others. And so that transition from Australia coming back to the US, we lost some supporters along the way and had to rebuild some of that. So there was financial pressure, and just restarting here in Southern California, which is a pretty expensive part of the country to live in.
Yeah.
It was expensive. And so, the financial pressures were a part of that whole package.
So then you start working through some of these challenges, developing a reputation and developing new relationships. like where does that start to, or what are the steps in the process there that happen that start moving you in the direction of more of the work that you're doing today? Like tell us that in between story that happens before we get to, all right, and here's some of what I'm doing right here and right now. How did you get to this
Yeah.
point?
Yeah. Well, it was just one day at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 month at a time, 1 year at a time.
Yeah.
Building relationships, building rapport here in Southern California with pastors and churches. Just meeting one-on-one, meeting with teams. At that time, the organization was running training events around the country, so developing my skill set as a trainer and gaining some confidence there, beginning to have some doors open up like that. But I would just say the kind of work that I do is very behind the scenes. It's not an upfront kind of ministry. I sign my emails alongside, comma buck. Whenever I'm an alongside kind of person. I'm the person that no one ever really meets. The church hardly ever meets me, so it just takes time, and so just over a period of time, developing trust and openness with leaders here in Southern California just took some time, and eventually doors began to open, and calendars started getting more and more full.
Okay. All right. So a certain matter of persistence and sort of pounding the pavement that had to happen. And then, slowly we're getting some momentum back again.
Yes.
And getting to use those skills that it seemed to me sort of discovered in Australia, like, oh, wow, this is something I'm both kind of good at and enjoy doing. Come back to the U.S. and you can start applying those things after a season of some pretty hard work to get back to that space. All of that is still with that same ministry that you had been with. At some point, unless I'm mistaken, you are not still with that ministry. Are you still working to some degree with them?
Yeah, I'm still in relationship with some of my former colleagues, but yes, from 2000 to 2010. In all honesty, John, I'm growing my capacities. I'm getting further training. I'm getting better at coaching. I'm getting better at being a facilitator and consulting. And I also pick up another sizable tool in my toolbox, which I call life planning, which is the opportunity to work with a leader for a whole day. Sometimes it's 2 full days, where we just work a number of flip chart exercises that I get somebody talking and discovering and getting clear about what might be next in their life. And so that tool gets kind of married into the mixture. And so for about a decade, I'm just learning and I'm growing and I'm testing and I'm trying different things. And eventually in 2014, I decided to go out on my own and start my own, I call it a coaching and consulting practice, if you will. It's a nonprofit. And it really, for me, was just kind of a name change. I was able to hold on to all the relationships that I had built up over the previous decade. And I really just moved into those things under my own banner.
Yeah.
I called it Empower Clarity.
Empower Clarity. Yes. You mentioned that in our introduction, that helping people find clarity is an important part of something you're passionate about, an important part of the work that you do. I imagine that there must have been a certain amount of that for you. I'm sort of tracing the steps here, and this movement to Australia, saying yes to the Lord to go there, and then a work of obedience to come back to the U.S. from Australia. And then there's a step from the work that you're doing with a specific organization was it known as Novo at that point?
Yes,
or just church. Okay, So
Yep.
but then making a step from there into your own work as a coach, consultant, and life planner. What was even that transition like for you? Taking a step out, sort of on your own in this process. I mean, was that something that you felt like, no, this is the right step? I'm going to step confidently and boldly into this, or was that sort of a boy? I don't know. I don't know if this is the right thing or not. I feel like maybe the Lord's calling me. What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. Honestly, there were a couple of guys that had left the mission agency and gone out on their own
Mm,
ahead of me,
okay.
at least a couple of years ahead of me. So I was intrigued by that move that both of those guys had done quite successfully. And
Mm,
so I had a couple of conversations with both of those guys. And it was pretty much, hey, what's it like? How did you do it?
yeah.
Do you regret it? What are the hidden landmines that I should try to avoid? And really, after those conversations, I felt like I have the confidence to try to step out on my own. And obviously, the big question about all of that is, will there be the financial resources to make
Yeah.
this work?
Yeah.
At that time, we had one in college, a second one on a way to college.
Wow.
Expenses probably as high as they were ever going to be for us as a family. So,
Yeah.
part of it is, Lord, will you provide the financial
Mm,
resources for me to be able to do this? And he's, here I am, 11 years later, and it's just been an amazing journey of him providing quite
yeah.
supernaturally
Wow.
whenever we needed it. So yeah. So to answer your question, it took me some time, and then when I decided to launch out on my own, it's just been like wind in my sails, pretty
Mm,
much from day one.
yeah. That's amazing. I ask that question just because I think that there's the potential that there's a number of people listening into our conversation right now that could be in similar circumstances where they're like, boy, and maybe it's not even necessarily in the realm of something
Yeah,
professional. But it's
yeah,
just like, man, I think maybe the Lord is inviting me into this thing, or I think this could be a
hmm,
positive step in my life, but is it
yep,
actually going to work out? And whether that's stepping into ministry or stepping out of official full-time ministry, or if it's just I don't know, building a family, if it whatever it might be. I just can't help but think that, oh boy, it's just nice to have a word of encouragement from a fellow alum saying, like, there were a few risky steps that we felt like the Lord was inviting us into, and even if they weren't necessarily easy every time, he provided every time. And
yep,
we do not regret taking those steps of risk and faith with the Lord.
yep, yep. Yeah, no. These days, I'm pretty consistently interacting with people in that 45 to 55 window
Yeah.
that are just they're wrestling with what could this second half of my life contribution look like.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of that person that they get to test that idea out with, and kind of
Mm,
tinker and really try to imagine what could it look like. So I'm seeing a lot of that, to be honest with you, that
interesting.
that midlife reevaluation.
Yeah. So you got to sort of live it, and now
Yeah,
you get to really
absolutely.
speak into other people who are wondering, is this going to be our lived experience too? Buck, help us walk through and sort of
Yeah,
get clear on what this could look like if we took some of these steps. And I know
yeah.
that you have a story or two that you can share with us about what that looks like. So I'd love to hear, like, can you just illustrate what this experience looks like for you as you sit down with some people and help them gain this
Yeah.
clarity for next steps.
Yeah, John, that's typically in that life plan space
Yeah,
where
sure.
somebody's in my living room, and we have a day or two to really just slowly walk around their life from a lot of different angles. And
Yeah.
and just dream. Like what lives inside of you? What if you
Mm.
knew you wouldn't fail? What might you
Yeah.
pursue? If you really had, if you knew that you weren't going to stumble or fall, what would you pursue?
Yeah.
One of the stories that comes to mind. This is a couple years ago now. A couple, they were in their late 40s, and they were really wrestling with whether or not to leave their mission agency that they were with to start their own nonprofit.
Okay.
And this is here in Southern California. And we spent a couple of days just musing about, was God in fact preparing them to launch out on their own and to start their own
Mm.
nonprofit? And as it's turned out, they felt like that's what God was saying to them. And so their ministry is focused on getting the gospel into high schools here in Southern
Oh,
California.
wow.
And they have the opportunity to, there's several high schools that allow them to come on campus during lunch, provide lunch
Okay.
for students, and create spiritual conversations.
Wow.
So they ended up being able to have a number of former staff go with them. I think they have over 15 staff now.
Okay.
And honestly, John, when I get a chance to talk with this guy, we catch up once a month in a regular coaching relationship. But when I hear the stories of what's happening on high school campuses here in Southern California and the spiritual openness
Wow.
and the brokenness that these guys get a chance to minister to, dozens and dozens and dozens of kids come into faith, and
Wow.
the stories
That's
that he's
amazing.
able to, yeah, the stories that he's able to tell, just they're spine tingling kind of stories of
Yeah.
redemption. So yeah, being able to be in the room when a dream kind of gets crystallized and clarified, and then to see
Yeah.
this couple go through all the ups and downs of starting their own ministry, and to be able to stay engaged with them. In fact, I saw the wife last week. Just delightful and a privilege, because they're getting a chance to do some things that at this point in my life, I'll probably never get it. I hope to get onto one of their high school campuses, but they're in some spaces that I could never get to, and so that's been a lot of fun.
That's amazing. That is such a cool story. I mean, I'm biased because I've been in campus ministry for however
Yeah.
many years now, and so any story about young people coming to know Jesus because people are stepping in and giving them time and attention is that's a good story. But I
Yeah.
mean, you don't always know that those are the stories that you're going to walk out with, Buck, after you've like engaged with somebody. So what is it about this work of coaching and consulting and life planning that just like, what is it that draws you to doing this kind of work?
Well, I know that because I've been at it for long enough, that the gift of two things, the gift of my presence, not
Mm,
that I'm particularly special, but the fact that I'm investing in another person by listening and asking questions and being curious, sometimes provoking and challenging and trying to stir
okay.
them and exhort them.
Mm,
Um, that the gift of doing that in another person's life has been very rewarding for me. But I also know that a lot of the people that I have interacted with through the years, John, haven't had that kind of person in their life.
yeah.
And so I know that I'm stepping into a place that's often a gap or a void, that they don't
Mm,
typically have a safe person to put the good, bad, and the ugly, or their dreams or their aspirations on the table.
yeah.
So I think the gift of presence is something that I find really satisfying and fulfilling.
Mm,
The other gift that I believe wholeheartedly in is the power of a good question. And so,
yeah.
I know I've asked a good question when somebody can't answer it quickly.
Okay.
And so just the power of a good question to kind of just drill down into somebody's mind and their heart, and helping them identify what is the blockage, or what is the thing that's holding you back, or what's the next step that you feel like you need to take.
Yeah.
And not to feel like I have to have the answers,
Right.
but that the question often helps somebody get clear. And it's not unusual at the end of an appointment for somebody to say something like, now that I, have heard myself say this out loud,
Yeah.
I probably need to do this. And I haven't provided a solution or the answer or the silver bullet. I've just listened. I've asked
Yeah.
questions. I've helped them get clear and to own kind of whatever the next step is that they need to take. So those are the things that keep me motivated, and the things that I have just part of God's call in my life to be an alongside kind of leader. I don't have
Yes.
to be the upfront person. I've found that to be a really good match for God's call in my life.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I'm remembering back to the time we spent in Australia as you're telling that story, and that you said that you noticed, even as you were sitting down with pastors, just them having a place or somebody to sort of confide in that moment, or to just let that they oftentimes pastors are sort of lonely in their space.
Yes.
There isn't somebody right there to sort of bounce ideas off of, because so many people look up to them as like, oh, you're the leader of the church. You got it all sorted out. You know what we're doing, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. And for them to be able to just sit and talk with you as somebody that they can open up to and say like, oh, I need some help. I need some help figuring out how to do those things. It makes sense that that's the sort of the reasoning behind this being such a draw, this work that you get to do. And it just strikes me that there are so many places, so many different roles that people can fill, that oftentimes the best version of that role is when they are just present, and when they don't give all the answers or give all the direction, they just ask a good question. I mean, my background is in psychology. I was hoping to be a clinician someday, or a therapist, and the idea was not like, how do you help somebody figure out, or how do you tell somebody what they need to do to figure out their life? It is, how do you listen well, reflect back, and ask good questions so that they can own next steps and come up with a plan, and spiritual direction, something very similar. And there's just lots of these places of, what does it look like to just be with someone and to ask a good question that helps them start to get clarity on what they're doing next. And it sounds so much like that's where you found a home right there in that same kind of space.
Yeah. Well, being in Australia, in my early 30s, and John, I'm sitting in the office of a guy that's leading a church of like 5,000 people. and I'm thinking, what do I have to offer this guy? I have no idea what it's like to lead in his chair, and the amount of people, and the complexity, and all the staff, and yet he so valued just me asking questions, and me just being curious and following up and caring and listening and all those kind of skills. I didn't have to have, he wasn't looking for answers from me. Once we built the trust between us, and so that just gave me confidence that, all right, I don't have to have all the answers, but if I can come up with some good questions and just be present with this person, there's something really valuable here. And then, as I've gotten older, I picked up some answers along the way, but I don't lead with those.
Sure.
I still believe that the clarity discovered by the person is worth its weight in gold. So I try to resist trying to be the smart guy and to be the silver bullet guy if I can.
Yeah. Yes. Now, Buck, you said just a few minutes ago that you've asked a good question when it takes somebody a moment to actually have a response to it. I have a question that's sort of on the other end of the spectrum every time I have an interview like this with somebody, and that's that I like to ask a very obvious question, And that's would you say the work that you get to do with Empower Clarity is a part of partnering with God and his world-changing work?
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's just a privilege every day. The places that I get a chance to talk to, the leaders, the communities. It's been a really delightful and very fulfilling expression of God's call on my life. So yeah, and I think I said in my early call with you that my life trajectory got established through InterVarsity.
Wow.
Sometimes when I introduce myself in front of crowds or groups or from a stage, I will often credit those formative years with InterVarsity as really setting the direction, and that was where I learned how to be a leader. That's where I got really engaged with this idea of world evangelization and missions and cross-cultural work. And so all of that got set in those formative years through InterVarsity. And so, all the small groups, I'm leading a small group out of my home these days, and that all got established back in a dorm room in Pennsylvania in the 80s.
That's awesome. It certainly feels like the sign of a good small group leader when you can be in the same space with somebody and not have to have all the answers. that you can sort of reflect things back to them and say, well, what do you think about this? And help them answer questions themselves. It sounds like somebody who's been just really, really well trained in small group leading to me.
Yes. What is it? Not to be afraid of silence.
Yes.
So I have a personality that can, wait for the silence and just realize that you don't have to fill the space with talking or your golden nuggets, even though you might have them. So, so all of that got shaped, and that was my first foray into leadership for sure.
I love that. Buck, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Thanks for telling this story. And for encouraging us through your experiences. As we said, I'm sure that there are people listening in that are saying, boy, what does it look like to gain clarity on next steps in my life, to know that there are people who can help make that happen, but also to know that sometimes even once I have clarity, once I know that like this is the invitation from the Lord, that there might be some tough work on the other side of saying yes. But that God will provide in the midst of that and continue shaping and developing you to do the thing that he has called you to do. And
absolutely,
I know I personally, and I'm certain that other people listening in are benefiting from that encouragement today. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing and empowering others to go out and to do the thing that God has called them to do.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. No, John, it's been very rewarding to look back, 40 plus years of God's faithfulness in my life. And so, yeah, it's been a fun journey of reminiscing for me.
Thanks for tuning in, alumni. If you know someone who would enjoy the InterVarsity World Changers podcast, please be sure to share the episode with them. You can also support the podcast by leaving a rating and a review or by visiting our donation page in the show notes. InterVarsity World Changers is brought to you by the InterVarsity Alumni Relations Team, hosted and produced by John Steele, production assistance by Mike Centera, and edited by Caleb Leppert. Our theme song is Crazy by InterVarsity alumnus Andy Minio. Go change that world, alumni.